I intended to be a breast cancer surgeon originally and was told that it would be beneficial to do a term in plastic surgery to learn a bit about the art of moving tissue around and how the blood supply of the tissue in the body works. I fell in love with the concepts behind plastic surgery, which really were helping those who could not be helped by other areas of medicine and almost adopting the medical orphan and taking on the problems that no one else really wanted to, and that appealed to me very much. And the more patients I began to meet, I realised that people were living with these terrible conditions like radiation injury and lymphedema or swelling of the limbs, and that no one was really putting their hand up to take ownership of these conditions. 90% of people with breast cancer survive the breast cancer itself. Of these people, there's a staggering 20,000 odd human years of productivity lost due to things like these crippling conditions. That's where the BRIEN Foundation comes in because, of course, as plastic surgeons, we pick up the pieces in a very piecemeal fashion. We would simply not be able to function if we were solely reliant on funding from the National Health and Medical Research Council and other government grants, because we don't have the resources to enable that granting process, as arduous as it is, to be undertaken, as well as do the research that it takes to actually apply for grants. And so the Wicking Foundation for an institute such as ours is absolutely critical for our ongoing survival.
The BRIEN Institute is unique and always has been. There are no other surgical research institutes in the country. Surgical research is very difficult to fund. The problem with surgeons is that they have to operate and be elsewhere rather than in the laboratory. We rely very much on our scientists and our key staff here at the Institute to do the projects. The role of the surgeon is more to do with the ideas and the coordination and the linkage with the hospital. We are associated with St Vincent's Hospital. The ability to transfer your research findings into patients is critically dependent on having this connection with a major hospital. The focus of the Institute had been microsurgery, and this was a very new field that O'Brien and St Vincent's Hospital surgeons here had very much pioneered. For the first time, for instance, you could reattach amputated parts, you could transplant toes to the hand to make a functioning hand and so forth. So it was a very creative kind of specialty. It was very exciting. I became director when Bernard O'Brien died in 1992. It was about this time that I first met John Wicking. John was a patient of mine. He presented with a lump in his face. This was a parotid tumour. It did involve intricate microsurgery to preserve the nerve. This is one of the great complications of this operation, where if you develop a facial paralysis, it's a very deforming disfigurement. And John, of course, was very grateful that the outcome was quite successful here. But it was because of this, I think, that we developed quite a strong bond between the two of us. We had things in common. John was very interested in the basic research that I told him about, particularly our tissue engineering, which fascinated him. I too was very interested in his exploits, of course, because they're larger than life. I recall quite vividly, John used to call me my boy. I assume I thought I was very much younger than he was, but it was a term of affection. And I remember I was called to the Australia Club, and during the occasion he came up to me. We were standing leaning against the mantelpiece, and he said to me, "Wayne, I'm going to die." It just shocked me because I was totally unaware that he was ill. And he mentioned that, "Don't worry, boy, we'll leave you something. You'll be looked after. Your foundation will be supported." The significance of funding, of course, for everybody is such a burden being lifted from you, the constant anxiety of not knowing if the research grant rounds are going to be successful. You are spinning the wheel. For us, it has meant that with this large donation that was left in his will, that we have been able to establish a directorship at this institute. Prior to that, we were a very fragile organisation, even though we had been going since 1972. With the assurance of John that we have ongoing funding, this has meant an enormous amount to stabilising the institute, to the extent that we've been able to appoint a new director.
What we're trying to do is both organise our understanding and our efforts in terms of clinically treating these patients, but also finding a way to research these conditions so that we can find better cures in the future that are more accurate and less reliant on actual surgery for these patients. A lot of this surgery is undertaken with microsurgery, so we're connecting up valves to bypass blockages, to bring in fresh tissue through connecting up blood supplies. We also have entered the age of stem cell surgery, so we can use a patient's own stem cells from their fat to spur blood vessels and skin and other tissues to regenerate. That's currently happening. What we ideally would like to do is to find out these small subcellular messages that are behind these processes, not only so that we can understand them and control them better, so that we can create entirely new treatments that may one day avoid surgery altogether. I have a patient who is an American expatriate lady, very energetic lady, full of life, as a school teacher in country Victoria, who was diagnosed with breast cancer some 3 or 4 years earlier. She had her 25th wedding anniversary coming up with her husband, and despite the fact that she'd been cleared of cancer, she was terribly upset by the fact that she could no longer wear her wedding ring. And so despite the fact that she'd survived her cancer, she had had a breast reconstruction, as far as she was concerned, the cancer had taken away one critical part of her life that she could never get back. And so by treating her lymphedema, the swelling of her arm, she presented on her 25th anniversary night, her hand complete with their wedding ring with which to renew their vows. And for her, that little small element meant that her life's ambition to be able to be married and live with her family in the way that she chose, not determined by her cancer and not determined by the disease resulting from the treatment of the cancer. And so to help people live and age and enjoy a quality of life and reconstruct the patient as a whole, not just, again, a missing breast or a missing limb or hand or injury to the face, but to actually resume their role as caregivers, members of a family, working people, grandparents, meaningful members of society living as they once lived, it became very clear that we had to do something more and actually stand up and take ownership of these diseases of cancer survivorship.
The importance of philanthropy, obviously, for all organisations now is critical, because money, of course, creates money, and when you can attract a quality person, they attract other quality people. You attract new students who are of highest quality, and the whole experience expands exponentially.
And these key experience levels and these key fundamental research findings that they have been able to bring, as well as techniques and ideas, have been critical to our ability to evolve and to stay relevant in this dynamic cut and thrust landscape of medical research. It's very fair to say that without the Wicking Foundation and without philanthropy in general, the O'Brien Institute would not be able to survive.
It is the likes of John Wicking and Janet who have given this money that has made such a difference to many organisations throughout not only Victoria but of course throughout the world.
Philanthropy in that respect is very, very special and holds a very special place in our society, because it means that through those who've been very fortunate and been very successful, you can spread a far-reaching umbrella to all spheres that probably one person or one individual or a group would not in one lifetime be able to affect.